Take it away, Laura.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We are excited to have you join us. We are Expero, and we will be talking about our financial crimes software today. Today, our speakers will be Michael Shaler from Expero and Scott Heath as well from Expero.
Thank you, Laura. So this is Michael Shaler. I'll be talking about the first phase, which is kind of the complexity and state of financial crimes. With that, I'll hand it off to Scott, and we'll talk about what the role of. Let's start again, please. Sorry.
Go ahead, Laura. Sorry.
It's okay, and I can edit through all of this.
Well, why don't you just go? We'll just start it from the top again.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome to our webinar today. We are excited to have you join us. Today, we're going to be talking about our financial crimes software with Expero. Our speakers today will be Michael Shaler and Scott Heath, both from Expero, and we hope you enjoy the session. And please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Laura. This is Michael Shaler. I'm here to talk about the complexity and state of financial crimes. Scott then will be talking about what the role of machine learning, graph analytics, and humans in the loop will be. And then we'll talk about what is the new connected financial crime solution. And then we'll address some questions at the end. And we're really excited to have you here because we think that this is highly relevant and could have a huge impact on your organization. Next slide, please. When we talk about financial crimes, it's really a spectrum of bad actors and bad behaviors. It goes all the way from money laundering to terrorist financing to cyber crime to fraud and tax evasion. So we've seen an uptick, pretty remarkable uptick in the last decade. Over $1/3 trillion in fines have been paid since the 2008 financial crisis. And when we talk about specifically fraud and money laundering, we need to be really clear about kind of the differences between the two. Money laundering starts with 3 stages, right? Placement, layering, and integration. And the layering part is where the greatest commonality lies between fraud and anti-money laundering. The consequences are huge for banks, though. It's $14.2 billion in 2020, and we expect that number to be much larger for last year, and we're going to see significant uptick because of the legislative environment. For why AML and fraud and other financial crimes are going to be so impactful for not just the financial services sector, but many, many sectors. Next slide, please. We're not talking about just small dollars. It's 2 to 5% of the global GDP, so upwards of trillions of dollars in impact. It's not just banks, it's retails, casinos, real estate, human and drug trafficking, and terrorists as well. It's not just risk scoring. That is necessary, but not sufficient. You need to understand connected behavior in order to find financial crimes. It's not just KYC. KYC meaning it's not just know your customer, but you need to know your customer's customer, and non-obvious relationships and connected behavior is the difference between mules and crime rings. And this is where we really think that the key payoffs are going to come. And it's not just humans. We need graph analytics and machine learning and AI to help investigators all do better. Next slide, please. One of the impacts of fraud is obviously the consequences of what regulators and enforcement agencies may have to do. JP Morgan paid a $1.7 billion fine. Following the Madoff crime scheme. HSBC paid even more for the failings in their AML program. And we're going to see even bigger consequences, possibly as soon as within the next 12 months. We want to make sure that our customers are safe and able to move forward with their investigative actions and organizations. So next slide, please. When we talk about kind of some of the things we hear from practitioners, Scott and I had the chance to attend 2 conferences this year, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners in Nashville in June. And then we went to ACAMS, the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists in Las Vegas in October. a few key themes that came up from practitioners at those conferences were, one, multi-industry. It's not just banking anymore. It's multidisciplinary. I mean, it spans multiple internal and external organizations and multiple data sources and multiple operating environments. And so some of it may be classified, some of it may be confidential, some of it may be open source intel. We need to understand that in a full context. And what that really kind of highlighted for me at when we were talking to practitioners in Nashville was that the data gaps are hard. Too much and too messy data for spreadsheets are kind of hard to overcome, but then you need to understand the non-obvious relationships that make such a big difference in investigations. We were just talking about kind of the Madoff crimes, and that's a great example of non-obvious relationships really paying off for investigators. On the anti-money laundering side, we're seeing a changing legislative landscape. The AML Act of 2020 put more teeth into enforcement, and enablers will go even further. The Enablers Act, which is pending in Congress, is through the House, and we'll see what happens in the Senate based on election results as they come in. The changing macro environment is obviously a huge impetus to enforcing anti-money laundering. And when Ukraine was invaded on February 24th, the world changed, and it will continue to change dramatically. We see the changing scale of consequences, billions of and tens of billions of dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars of consequences are changing the speed, scope, and scale of consequences. And then the last thing that's so interesting is kind of how cryptocurrencies have added new complexity, and it requires new capabilities to do the proper adjudication of potential suspicious activities and sanctions and all the rest. I think that three themes that span both sets of conversations we had was, one, the culture is a big challenge. It's not just technology, it's not just process, but it's also how people work together in these investigative teams. And what we're seeing, one of the things I saw that kind of struck me was that we have leading banks that are closing the gaps between methodology and data between their AML and anti-fraud investigative teams. And so they're cross-training, they're actually leveraging common data platforms and common analytics practices. And so what they're seeing is that, especially in the context of graph analytics, faster, deeper, and wider insights are the fulcrum for much, much better outcomes. And as much as we like to, see AI and ML be a fix-it-all problem, it requires still expertise, and it requires not just AI plus ML plus graph analytics plus visualization. Visualization empowers experts to do their work even better, and so that delivers lower false positives, higher quality SRs, and better collaboration. So I think that the key takeaway is the world is changing, but we can deliver even better tooling and better capabilities with the connected financial crimes toolkits. Next slide, please. Underneath the covers is, a kind of a key set of graph analytics that are possible here. And you see that Gartner has identified 6 key approaches: path, community, centricity, similarity, link prediction, and connectivity. And these are all ways to understand financial crimes in context, identifying a pathway through a complex transactional chain, understanding, whether or not a single bad actor is part of a larger fraud crime ring in community detection is powerful. Who are the key influencers in terms of centricity? How similar are these behaviors? And can we predict outcomes before they happen? And then can we actually understand the connectivity strengths and weaknesses? Summary is, these are very powerful capabilities, and we are able to deliver immense value based on this because of our platform. Next slide, please. So let's talk about kind of underlying business cases in terms of how the investigation and machine learning analytics can work together. Obviously, we see AML being top of the list. Internal fraud is very important. Insider trading is still a huge concern for some of these key financial institutions. And from a consumer perspective, credit card is amazing. I'm a Chase customer, and I haven't gotten a false positive in years, and I'm so grateful for that because of the work that they have done to make my life safer. ID falsification, threat, and cyber, trade surveillance, audit and compliance. These are all business imperatives that must be addressed. How we get there is through advanced visualization, through graph analytics, through geospatial capabilities, through IoT systems, and then we have our investigative team workbench and investigation capabilities that are so powerful. Then finally, we add to that, force multipliers include, patterns and recommendations, what we can do, what if and planning. We can do predictive analytics. We can do scoring and risk, and then we can do all the decisioning and investigation collaboration that are necessary. Summary is, we're able to really drive really powerful outcomes by bringing together a set of capabilities that are unique in the industry, we think. Next slide, please. If you look at what are the key drivers, there's 3 rules in business, right? Make money, save money, and protect money. But if you actually think about what the strategic objectives are from a 30,000 foot point of view, you have kind of AML and fraud on the make money side. You have the cyber and cloud capabilities that can help you save money, and our solution is available on the cloud today. And then finally, we have in terms of protecting money, we have fraud detection and audit and regulatory compliance. All these strategic objectives roll up into key use cases: KYC, Customer 360, real-time credit card fraud detection, AML fraud rings, and on down all the way to prosecution and regulatory. These use cases address key personas. We have the executives who will shriek in the middle of a meeting, I do not want to go to jail, I do not want to get fired, and we can help that. And then teams who are looking to prevent fraud with data science, and the audit and compliance teams, as well as the technical teams who provide the infrastructure to make this all possible. Summary is, we have identified some key needs, and we have a unique way to solve those problems with a very powerful set of solutions. Next slide, please. Underlying all this is the notion that graph is how we think. We don't think in rows and columns and joins. That's not how the world arrives in our way of thinking. We can connect them if we preserve the connections between entities through their relationships. Then all of a sudden we can actually put these relationships in context as a set of pattern behavior and a set of investigative practices that can help understand how this is all connected. Summary is, it's a natural model for interconnected data, and it helps us understand the world much better, even as messy as it is. Next slide. Data is messy, and we can connect the dots. We can do so in a way that helps us find much better answers. So graph analytics help is a starting point. Let's talk more about what that means. Next slide, please. When we think about traditional database query and analytics approaches, the traditional database uses, is good for transactional systems with structured data. But graph databases can take structured or unstructured data and connect the dots in ways that SQL can't. Summary is, graphs are suited for environments where the connections are just as important as the data points themselves. It's key here to say we actually can do better work by having a better understanding of connections. If you kind of take that to the next level, we have the traditional rows and columns of relational databases. We also have columnar approaches for analytic databases, and then we have document databases that actually can leave behind more of the structure. But the summary is that when we think about what that means for how we can represent this. My good friend Dan McCreary, highlighted this so well in one of his slide decks about how we can overcome the limitations of relational and analytic databases and represent that in graph so that we can actually have better insights, better transactionality, and better analytics. Translate that into the next slide. And what we see are on the left is more on the SQL, NoSQL side, but on the right, as we move forward by adding graph, adding machine learning, adding the combination of OLAP plus OLTP means that we have much better decisions, and we can actually, increase the maturity model of organizations who want to, who are looking to significantly upgrade their investigative work from an fraud and AML perspective. Summary is, graph is a fulcrum for making much better decisions and making much better predictions about crime at scale. Translate that into the next slide, and you see that we start with machine learning and deep learning, which can increase capability, you increase your outcomes by 5 to 10%. Then you can increase it with the combination of graph plus machine learning plus algorithmic insights. And then you can increase another 20% by giving humans better visualization, better toolkits to see into the problems that experts alone can actually leverage what is underneath from a machine learning and graph capability into adding, that expert insight that visualization can deliver. Summary is, we're talking about 45% improvement in terms of lower false positives, better investigations, more accurate SARs, and better collaboration. Next slide, please. When we think about kind of how to manage the fire hose of alerts that goes with trying to do anti-fraud and AML investigations, non-actionable alerts is the stalking horse, and it really is very, very challenging. Anybody in IT who knows about DevOps or site reliability also knows that non-actionable alerts are a very, very big challenge. And so once we start to resolve entities, and once we start to deliver algorithmic capabilities, understanding these alerts in context and reducing alerts, but also aggregating them in a much better way is very powerful. And then if you start to increase the accuracy, the number of actually productive alerts, you see no change in risk exposure, but you see a 70% decrease in alerts to reduce it to just the productive actionable alerts. As if the alerts are non-material or they're flagged by other rules, we can incorporate that and provide much better insights. Summary is, we make teams more efficient, more effective, and quite frankly, help increase their win ratio in hard, challenging situations. Next slide, please. So if we think about kind of how to reduce journals between unrelated accounts, which is a key scenario in the investigative process, we can reduce the alerts from 371 to 61, an 84% increase in effectiveness. And so all of a sudden we're really focusing on much better suspicious activity reports, much better collaboration, and much better investigative outcomes. And so once we do the full analytics, we can actually start to say, okay, this makes much more sense. We can be much more productive, and we can actually have a much better organizational posture towards how we can win these investigations. Next slide, please. So summary is that we can increase accuracy, we can decrease false positives, we can leverage your existing technology stack, add to this, we can increase the speed and efficiency, we can adapt to legislative changes that are on its way. It's a modular total solution, and it's powered by Expero and Graph Analytics. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Scott.
Thanks, Michael. I think the core takeaway here is that, look, the landscape, whether you're in anti-money laundering, credit card fraud, trade surveillance, cyber, it doesn't really matter in some case. We saw in that tree of pain how those different use cases are tied together. And now we've seen this vision of how we can be incredibly more accurate, reduce those false positives, make a real dent in how we process and where we go to market. Well, how does Expero's connected platform help me do that? And then in this next section, we see that investigation, again, regardless of the business unit that you're in, regardless of the section or sector of how you're helping your firm, the Expero platform lets me see the data, model the data. So if I'm an IT practitioner or someone on that other side, I can do those kinds of things. But as a business person, I want to use all that great stuff. I want to use all those formulas and algorithms. I want to get to that accuracy because I have to do it faster. And one of the things the connected platform brings to you is this entire turnkey. It includes a graph database. It bolts onto your SQL systems. But more importantly now, as investigators or business persons, I can trust that all of those great things are occurring. And that's really where we're going. And if I'm on that workbench side, I can now start to do a higher order of connected data, whether you have an entity matching process, and most people have screening and those things today, our solution can bump that up a notch. We can also then augment with your existing machine learning. So as Michael shared with us, if you've started down the path and you're using machine learning today, we've got great news. It bolts in with what you already have. If your alert logic is not great and your accuracy is not perhaps at the top, again, this bolt-in capability allows us to bring in the graph model. So the connected platform includes the graph database. So no longer do you need to arm wrestle with IT people about which one is best. It comes with it. And in the end, both sets of persons, whether I'm in the data and analytics or the IT team or the business user, now has a home inside of the product. And again, it's modular. So regardless of what system you may already have, like Nice Actimize or Oracle Mantis, this system is designed to bolt on and enhance that. Now, that great math that Michael shared with us, that's an incredible number, 80% improvement, not 80% overall accuracy. How do we do that? Well, the secret sauce, if you will, is bringing this graph capability, this machine learning and graph algorithm combination, the ability to do these different categories of things, or as we call them, recipes. Perhaps now what I'd like to do is look for similarity of previous patterns or clustering or matching patterns. And now what I want to do is I want to project and predict with that incredible accuracy. And that is now sort of unlocking why the Expero platform is so incredibly unique. I now have all of these different algorithms and machine learning at my fingertips. Now, part of that is the Expero system comes with out-of-the-box algorithms and preset recipes for certain types or categories of use cases. So now we can go down farther on the path and really start to get to solving the fraud instead of what some of our customers have said, I'm still upstream hunting. I haven't even gotten to the point where I can start to utilize these. Well, now we've brought that to the table where it's sort of all combined, if you will. And in that previous diagram, depending on who you are in the process, these are at your fingertips. Now, the way that we do that is these recipes. This is really where we start to unlock that. So the ability to take the deep link analysis, combine that with a pattern that may be good or less good. Let's keep an eye on it, or it's bad. Then what we can do is we can start to find this overlay of where do those things connect, and then we can start to segment, create neighbors or neighborhoods of communities of bad persons. Then we overlay it with time and space. One of our customers realized that perhaps in one of their business units, things were status quo. They were losing approximately $100,000 a month, and that was considered acceptable. When they combined this recipe with two business units, they realized they were losing $10 million. Why? Because the bad guys had figured out the siloed nature of the data and the way that they were looking at it. And then they were doing community hopping across the silos in the firm. And the key here now is we are able to unlock and unmask that kind of behavior. And again, whether you're in anti-money laundering or cyber or credit card or trade surveillance, all of those things can potentially matter. Now, that seems very daunting, but that again is sort of why this platform brings that together. And what do we do behind the scenes, right? Over on the right, this is a picture of the way the data looks in a graph database. Now, a business user would never see this. So if you're a business user, you don't need to worry, but a little bit of a peek behind the scene here, which is the blue is considered good. The green is considered okay. The red is starting to look a little more nefarious. And then in the bottom down there, it's actually very bad. Well, how did we do that clustering? Well, that's what we just spoke about in those different algorithms. I'm actually creating in step number 2, what are called subgraphs, connected data sets of many different types that say, I am potentially bad. Step number 3 is looking at that data in real time, by the way. And what we can do then is instantly recognize the patterns in step number 4 about what is good, what is bad, and in fact, what is indeed truly connected to other data. With that speed, that velocity, we now have unprecedented accuracy and the velocity that simply returns to our business user over on the right in the bottom, a simple screen that says, I am highly confident that is potentially fraud, and you, investigator, should do something about it. But this is really kind of what's going on behind the scenes in such a fast manner. Now, how do we start to do these kinds of elements? Well, that is really ultimately now where the connected platform comes in. It's designed for all types of users. There's a place and a home for everyone. So if you're in the technology layer on the bottom, or you're building alerts and rules, there are screens for that. And we're going to see those here in a minute. The other element then is if I'm an investigator, I want to know that the more accurate rules are there, that I'm spending my quality time on things that are truly potentially fraudulent, as opposed to the false positives. That alert and case management, if you have one today, the connected platform bolts into most of the standard ones and can connect to that. So we can now make what you have better. If you don't have one and you're in spreadsheet world, which is still a fair amount of what goes on with many of the firms we work with, we have an answer for that too. So again, the takeaway here now is everybody in the firm has a role, can now touch this incredibly new and powerful capability, so that we can now get to the action of increasing those accuracies and finding fraud. Now, what we've done then is we've modularized that, right? So if you don't need all of these, that's great. You can pick and choose which ones you need and which ones you install. Some of our firms have started with 1 or 2 of these. Others have said, we don't really have a full turnkey system. So again, the platform is designed to be modular. And again, depending on what your firm is doing, it has, if you will, an interface and or functionality for different user groups and parts of the puzzle. Now, how do we do this? Well, inside of the toolkit, it's designed at first to be configurable. We've actually had customers say, no one's ever asked me what I would like to have. The system now comes with configurable capability, so that now when we work with our IT partners and our technology partners, the system comes with a functionality so that it can be configured. And how does it start? Well, we have dashboards. Now, we're not in the dashboard business. Our goal is to plug into what you may already have in Tableau, Power BI, or Looker. These are actually highly connected widgets that are connected to that data that give me insights on alerts or allow me to add certain functions. And again, these can be mix and match. But the point of this now is creating actionable outcomes. If there are alerts, I can click into them. If there are functional areas, I can click into those, and it drives me quickly into where I'm going. Behind that, we can do entity and screen matching, right? So what do we do here? Well, the first step on this is either onboarding new customers or perhaps continuous monitoring how we sort of make those connections. So just because you came into our firm, we can continuously stream that. And whether you have data or you need to purchase external data, the system allows us to do both of those different elements. We can also create now incredibly sophisticated alerts, but simply by dragging and dropping the data elements is incredibly powerful. We can also now start to tune the model. So if I'm a layperson and I want to see how these different elements are working together, can they be more accurate? Am I working with the US government for regulatory? Perfect for that kind of capability to show the detail. How did this model from a risk management work that's better? Is it in the best interest of the firm, right? A way for that to happen. The other thing that we can do now is deep link analytics, those non-obvious relationships that Michael talked about. How do I take things that are maybe alerts, but before they're actually cases and SARS, how do I dig in to go find those things? I can take snapshots, I can interrogate this. So if I'm a level 3 investigator, now I can go find those patterns, and even better, when I find them, I can teach the system how deep and how complicated they may be to now stop those in the future. Case management, whether you have one today or you need one, this allows me now to aggregate all of that collected data, whether it's evidence or connections, those multiple kinds of alerts. All of that now can be connected and simply reported on out of one simple user interface. The next one then is for our IT team or super users. We have that capability now for your team to manage that. So if you want to change color patterns or layouts or who sees what or role security, all of that is simply and easily managed by you. Our job is to teach our customers how to fish and then manage these systems without us. And yet we'll be your partner all along the way. Now, let's go look at a demo. And in our first demo today, we're not going to be able to see all the features, but we're certainly now going to take a quick walk through how the process works. Now, what we do then is many times on our first step in the journey is we saw previously where we load the data, we have the data elements from the IT side, but our first step is let's go build a trigger or an alert. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go just simply look at what these maybe. In this case, it's an anti-money laundering. It's a terrorism syndicate, and I'm looking for groups of persons that may be doing certain types of things, and they're doing it as a group. What we'll see now is just simply showing how I can build that logic tree. The logic is in this case looking for any type of investment customer that is connected by 3 hops or data connections to a known SAR. I've also now said, go look for a blacklist. And if there is similarity to previous connected wire transfer or syndicate elements that are considered fraud, I'd like to know about those. And then finally, I have a couple of elements, one for a community. Show me if it's more than one. And there are certain other product codes are there. Now, I could have simply come to my side over here, and maybe I wanted to look at crypto data, or I wanted to show similarity or other kinds of elements. The point of this is that all of these elements can simply be dragged and dropped and connected. Now, once I've built that logic, all I do now is I go to the next level and I can test it. Again, I'm a business person. In 1 to 2 minutes, I can then run that data and realize that, yes, that is a very accurate model. And I have found sort of in my test data set here exactly what I had expected. So that means that now my trigger or my alert is ready for production, and I can go to that next step here. Again, we're not going to install that today, but in your environment, that's how you would do it. Now that I have that trigger, I would like for this to do something. I would like for it to perhaps run on a daily, real-time basis, weekly basis, whatever it may work for your firm. And again, we can then send either systematic connections, we can send them, and what we'll see today is to a dashboard or any other kind of custom element, whether it's assignments, other person's inboxes. Well, now that I have that alert, I can have as many of those as I want, as I saw in my first queue. The next thing that I want to do is perhaps now I have a group of analysts. These may be level 0, level 1, level 3, however your firm works. In this queue, what I'm now seeing is I can see things like priority. I can see things like workflow, who's assigned to it, what is the sort of relative risk or priority, and I can simply walk through this, and now I can start to introspect this. In this case, what I see is there are 2 separate alerts, not just one, but multiple. The first alert here, as I click on this one, I can see was primarily a high set of transactions against an account where there was connected fraud. Remember the alert that I built. I also see in the second alert that there was indeed a syndicate, a group of both customers and it looks like other kinds of employees that are involved here. So a much larger connectivity. And I've simply written that one alert. This allows me to look at this before I can decide. Now I can also go in here and I can assign this and now escalate this. And there's more functionality here, but we can talk about that later. So now that I've made those connections, remember now I have that alert that I'm starting to look at. What I may do is actually come over and now want to explore that. Now maybe I'm a level 2 person. Well, what the system has done for me that's so incredibly powerful is it has created what are called snapshots. And in this case, I see that perhaps one investigator took the first snapshot and said there may be a loan connection, and it looks like this customer were working together. I can also see the next one where now something inside of a bank branch has perhaps occurred. And what I can see now is that, well, customers and a branch is involved. Well, as I fast forward to this, the very end, the aha moment is, yes, there were actually two kinds of connections. There were two kinds of rings. I can see now that there is a group of employees and customers. Well, if I look closely, the employees and the customers here are actually similar. So Fran Farmington is both a customer and employee. And what has happened now is there are a group of these employees and they are working through some of these different accounts together. And what I have now uncovered is there's actually an employee family member that was involved in this. So in 2 mouse clicks, I have now been able to find a network, a deep linked network of this syndicate, if you will, that is both laundering money and then laundering through these different kinds of accounts. Now, clearly your data will be different. We can also see things like down at the bottom, we can see time. We are able to look at atomic time. So as individual events occur, I can see what those different elements are doing inside of that. I can see where those transactions are at the atomic level when those different events occur. And why is that important? As we can see here, and if we ping, we can now recreate these for where we're going next is case. Now, ultimately, what I can do then is I can flag these different elements. And now what I can say is train the network, use these sort of known connections to fraud so that the next time it actually gets more intelligent, if you will. That's how we start to increase the bar. Now, our next stop is how do I get to a case? This is where I tie all those different elements together. I have the ability now to dig in and I can show everything. I can see where those different events were over here. I can see when those different steps occurred in time. I can start to introspect those, and then I can start to see things on maps. I can see where things occurred. I can see the comments of those different elements. And then obviously what I can start to do now is I can create reporting and sort of meta case management. But again, the whole system is designed to be very fast. Now, today's is obviously a very fast walkthrough of that. Now, depending on who you are, you can have your own dashboard. So if I want to see either individual, whether it's companies or accounts or persons, what is their individual risk? Or I can look at different kinds of accounts and how they do those elements. I can look at transactions, fraud. I can look for SARS, AML, et cetera. And these are designed to be multi-business unit. So if you're in one group, I could set up custom or different dashboards to do that. Each of these widgets, as we had said before, could sit inside of a larger dashboard, a Tableau or a Looker, and then these sort of widgets, if you will, would be part of your system. So again, this was meant to be a fast tour. And I think the whole takeaway here is that it's easy for a business user. It's drag and drop. These are the kinds of things that ultimately are driving us to that productivity as we move through. So from a business side, we've seen now sort of what those systems look like. And now what we'll do is talk a little bit about some of the technology. Now, if I'm a technologist or an IT person, why do I care so much about this graph? Well, number one is it's fast. It allows us to do things that have not been done before. We're using underneath the covers a graph database that's included in the CoNNected platform that allows us to bolt on to your SQL systems or your NoSQL systems, but we bring this to the party, if you will, so that we can be fast. And it's massive in its scalability. We can do trillions of connections in real time. We can do billions of nodes and vertices in that connected world. Why? Because this in-database analytics is the power that we need to get that accuracy. But what we've seen from the business side is it's simple, it's easy and straightforward. The other thing then is, as we start to look to how these things work together, is again, the ease of use for both our technology partners and our business partners is job number one. The scalability and performance, if it can't get there, then all of that great sort of capability and usability doesn't do much for us. And that's why this importance of sort of the muscle behind the scenes. And then finally, if you have many different existing systems, as many of our customers do today, we can connect what you already have, use and leverage the investment and the technology that your teams are there. The goal of this is to accentuate and bring speed to the table for how we find the fraud. And that ultimately now is bringing it all together. Why is this solution so much different? Well, we believe, obviously, with those accuracy numbers that are from real customers and the scalability, it allows us to be very unique. We can also be flexible from our modularity and how we can sort of set these kinds of things up. Finally, where we started, as Michael pointed out, it's about the accuracy. If we can do that at scale by increasing 60%, as Michael was pointing out, decreased by 80%, and then I can use my technology, that's what it's all about. The rest of the other elements here follow along, which is it's fast. We can be in production as fast as 14 weeks. Why? Because this modular solution. And then that helps us change and adapt. And then ultimately, you no longer need to worry about which graph database, how's it all going to work together. Expero has done all that work for you. And that really is sort of bringing together what connected financial crimes is all about. Where can you find us? Well, great news. We're in the cloud. We can also be on premise. So this solution can go behind your firewall if that's what you prefer. And it's also now easy to consume out in the web. And again, we can work in private tenants as well. But the takeaway here then is it's flexible and now it's fast so that your system and your solution can be out fighting fraud sooner rather than later. With that, we'll throw it back to you, Laura.
Okay, cool. You can stop the recording because Michael and I will be live to do questions.
Very good.
Super.
Hey, Scott, that was great.
Yeah,